on Goblin Reddit. Today's story is...
I exposed my sister's abuse of my son. She lost her inheritance and family rights. It all started a few days ago at my nephew's birthday party. My son, who is also 8 years old, was invited along with several of his school friends. That morning, my son wasn't feeling quite right, so I asked him several times if he really wanted to go. He insisted that he could go, and as he only seemed to be a little tired, I thought that being with his friends would do him good. I dropped him off at my sister's house and went out with my wife to do some shopping and see a movie. For the next 3 hours, I tried to contact my sister to find out how my son was doing. I hadn't mentioned to her that he wasn't feeling very well before the party, and so I wanted to make sure he was okay. Every time I called, the phone rang with no answer. I also tried to send a message to my son's emergency phone, but I later found out that my sister had taken it away at the beginning of the party because she has a strict rule about not using screens in her house. Even when my son started to feel very unwell and asked for his phone to call me, she refused to give it to him. After almost 3 hours without being able to communicate, my wife and I began to worry. As it was already getting late, we decided to go and pick him up. When we arrived, most of the guests had already left and there were only a few children left in the room. I found it strange not to see my son with them, so I asked my sister where he was. Suddenly, I noticed that she became very nervous. She asked us to wait in the living room while she went to look for him, but something didn't add up to me. Why wouldn't my son be with the other children? I followed her, even though she insisted that I stay. My wife came with me, and as we walked, my sister began to explain that during the party my son had said that he felt very sick and wanted to call me. She didn't believe her, thinking that he was just trying to get attention like children do. When he kept insisting and annoying her, she got angry and sent him to the basement as punishment, because she thought he was going to ruin her son's party that she had been planning for weeks. She didn't let him call me or answer my calls because she was too busy with the party. She had completely forgotten about him until we arrived, which is why he was acting so strange. As you can imagine, I was furious as I listened to this and I made her run to the basement to open it. When we found my son, he was crying non-stop, shaking and almost unconscious. He had vomited several times on the floor. Without wasting any time, we took him straight to the emergency room at the nearest hospital. Even though it didn't seem serious, we couldn't take any chances. My sister followed us in her car, leaving her husband in charge of the remaining guests. We left through the kitchen door because I didn't have time to explain, and even though I told her not to come to the hospital because she was the last person I wanted to see, she came anyway. In the waiting room, my sister kept apologizing, but we ignored her. While the doctor was attending to our son, my father and brother-in-law arrived. They asked us what had happened, as my sister had only told her husband that he was in the hospital without giving any details. After the guests left, they came to the hospital. My sister was about to tell them that everything was fine, but I went ahead and told them exactly what had happened. I was so angry that I didn't care how it would look to her, and as expected, both my father and her husband were horrified. Apparently she had told all the guests that my son had gone through the kitchen because he was feeling a bit unwell and I had come to pick him up, but that it was nothing serious. It sounded reasonable and nobody suspected anything, because what he had really done was so far-fetched that it would never have occurred to anyone. When I told them the truth, my brother-in-law started arguing with her, calling her crazy and other things. My father was silent for a while, and then he turned to my sister to tell her that he had been thinking about setting up a trust fund for both of them in our future. But now, he would only leave everything to me and the grandchildren. She would receive nothing, and he would make sure of that. We were all surprised by this announcement, and my sister began to cry within seconds, but nobody felt sorry for her. Several days have passed since then. My son is much better physically, but he is still somewhat traumatized, so we are dedicating all our time to being with him. During these days, my sister has not stopped begging me to make things up with her father, saying that the punishment is too severe for what she did. Her own husband does not speak to her and keeps her son away from her. She has apologized like a million times, but honestly I don't care. What she did was horrible and there is no going back. Although deep down I feel strange about my father's decision to exclude her from the trust fund. Originally it was only going to be for his 2 grandchildren, and we both agreed to that. But now I am also included as a beneficiary, and I don't know, it feels weird and I'm having a hard time processing it. That's why I want to know, would I be the bad guy if I agreed to my father naming me as a beneficiary of the trust fund along with the grandchildren, leaving my sister out because of what she did? Update 1. Hi everyone. First of all, I want to thank you for all your comments. My son has now fully recovered, and we are touched by how many people care about him. We really appreciate all the support and concern you have shown in your comments. It's really very sweet of you. Regarding recent events, I have decided to block my sister. It's been a week since the party, and I think she should consider herself lucky that we haven't decided to take legal action or report her, although we could. We just don't need that drama right now. It would take a lot of time and money to pursue this legally, and it's not worth it. We have been considering reporting her to Child Protective Services, CPS, although this is a recent development. I didn't mention it in my previous post because, honestly, we weren't even thinking about what to do about her. I was more focused on my son and the trust fund situation. It hadn't even occurred to me that reporting her might be necessary, but I think it's a good idea because she has a child of her own and sometimes looks after other children in her home. I don't think it's safe for that to continue for now. There's clearly something wrong with her. I don't know what it is, but normal people don't act like that. If I report her to CPS, maybe they'll suggest therapy or something similar, and she'll be able to manage her problems better in the future. In the long run, it will be the best thing for her. Some people ask me why I didn't block her from the start and why I allowed her to send me messages. Honestly, it was a moment of weakness. After our mother passed away a few years ago, my father, my sister and I became very close, and that's why I trusted her enough to leave my son at the party and go with my wife. If I hadn't trusted her, I would have stayed all night, because I don't usually let my son spend that much time at other people's houses without thinking it through. We've been very close these last few years, so it was hard for me to block her, especially when she was going through personal problems. I'm a father, but I'm also her brother, so I felt sad for her while also being furious at what she did to my son. There were a lot of mixed feelings and I felt lost. That's why I hadn't blocked her before, but now I don't think I need to deal with this. I don't even need to feel bad for her, even if it was an honest mistake. It's just not a mistake you can make with children. These things can leave marks for life, and if she doesn't have the common sense to understand that, then maybe she shouldn't have children in her house. I'm going to talk to my father today, and then we'll probably report her to CPS. It won't be easy, but I feel it's necessary because what she did was extremely irresponsible and horrible, not just for a 7-year-old but for anyone. And I can't ignore it just because she's my sister. I probably wouldn't have thought twice if it had been anyone else, but because it was her we were giving her the benefit of the doubt. Unfortunately, I don't think apologies are enough in this situation. Update 2. It's been a few hours since my last update, and my wife and I have just had dinner with my father. We mentioned to him that we were considering reporting my sister to the CPS. He didn't know how he would react because, after all, she is still his daughter, and even if he is angry with her, he didn't know if he would agree with something so serious. He thought about it for a while, and I thought he would tell us not to do it, but in the end he told us to do what we think is right. If we think we should report her to CPS, then we should do it. He was very honest about the whole situation and told us that even before he had seen my sister being hard on her own son several times. Most of the time she was kind and calm, but sometimes she lost control over small and insignificant things when he was present. Then her son would cry, and she would try to make up for it, but it was obvious that she had problems controlling her temper. With my son the situation got completely out of control, and he had advised her several times to seek professional help, take parenting classes and find a healthier way to handle this because, honestly, children are going to be children. They are going to make mistakes all the time, they are going to make a lot of mistakes and they will not always be perfect and easy to deal with. But as parents, we can't afford to make them feel bad and scare them all the time. She said she would do something about it, but she never did. After this incident, my father decided that enough was enough, and he told us that he should have taken it more seriously with her before, but he never thought that things would get to this point. I don't even blame him because I don't think anyone could have imagined that she would do something like that. We don't think that people are capable of these things until they do them. In short, my father told me to go ahead with the complaint to the CPS, and thought that since our son had to go through this, the decision should be completely ours and we didn't even need to ask his opinion. He assured us that if they asked him anything during the investigation, he would be completely honest, which was a relief. I really hope that my sister cooperates with the CPS because that will make things easier for her. That's the real goal here. I don't want to cause her any problems, I just want her to improve and learn from this situation. I also talked to my father about the trust fund. I told him I felt a little uncomfortable because I knew it was originally only for the grandchildren. But he explained that he had been thinking about including me and my sister as beneficiaries for a while now, and he planned to surprise us at Christmas. His business is doing very well and he saves a lot of money because he lives modestly and doesn't need great luxuries. That's why he thinks it's fair to include me as a beneficiary, and since it's his money, nobody can tell him what to do with it. Even if my sister thinks it's not fair, She'll have to accept it because what she did at the party is simply unjustified. My father also pointed out that my sister won't have any financial problems. She works, her husband works, and together they earn good money. So it will be fine, and besides, my father will be with us for a long time to come because he is in good health. The money from the trust fund is something that will happen in the distant future, so I don't have to worry about it now. After talking to him, I feel much better and I no longer feel guilty. In fact, I didn't have to feel this way from the start. I'm not doing anything wrong. I didn't pressure or force my father to do this. He decided on his own, and I'm not going to worry about whether it's fair or not anymore. I'm not going to stress about things that don't deserve it. If my sister feels bad about this, it's a shame, but she should have thought things through better, and that's all I have to say about it. I'm glad I had dinner with my dad and talked about all this, because the conversation gave me the clarity I needed. Now my wife and I know what to do and we're going to move forward. We just hope something good comes out of this and that the situation doesn't get worse. I really hope my sister recognizes her mistakes, shows remorse and takes steps to make things right. Update 3, Hi all. After my last update, many commented that it was no longer necessary to report my sister to CPS because my son was already safe and I didn't need to worry. But as I said, this isn't about revenge or getting her into trouble. It's about doing the right thing. I knew that if she was truly sorry, she would cooperate. And I knew that, as my son is safe now, CPS would probably not take very drastic measures. I had consulted with a friend who works as a foster carer and knows the organization well. I also did my own research before taking this step because I knew things could get complicated quickly, but in the end it was about doing the right thing since she has her own child and sometimes takes care of other children. So I made the report, and as expected, the social worker asked us why we had taken so long. We explained that, as it was my sister, it was hard for me to decide whether I should do it or not, but now I was sure of my decision. 2 weeks have passed since then, and the social worker contacted my sister. He spoke to my wife and me, we told him everything that happened honestly, and then he spoke separately with my son, who was a bit nervous but told him everything that happened. We showed him the medical records of the emergency and the subsequent consultation, and confirmed that it had been an emergency because my son had severe food poisoning. That was not my sister's fault, but she should still have taken it seriously. After talking to us, they visited my sister 6 days later, and from what I know, she cooperated and showed a lot of remorse. In the end she was crying, but she didn't overdo her emotions and she remained sincere. She showed the social worker around the house, and although the basement wasn't a dangerous place, just very cold, the worker told us that she would consult with her supervisor and they would let us know the decision soon. We tried to get her to tell us what would happen, but she explained that the decision didn't depend on her alone. She could only make recommendations, but she told us that, as my sister had cooperated and shown remorse throughout the visit, and from the initial investigation, it seemed that although it was a bad thing, it was probably an isolated incident. So she would suggest to her supervisor that my sister take therapy and parenting classes, as we had requested. Although we don't know the final decision yet, I hope it will be that one. And that this won't go any further. Update 4, It's been a week and a half since my last update, and a few days ago the social worker contacted us to say that they had a decision. Fortunately, they took our suggestions into account. My sister showed that she really wanted to improve, and both her husband and her son said that, although she sometimes has problems with her temper, something like this had only happened once, and they would do everything possible to make sure it never happened again. Considering all this, they decided that I would have to go to therapy and parenting classes until there is an improvement, and I cannot have unsupervised contact with my son. The latter is no longer happening, so we are in agreement. Everything has turned out exactly as we wanted, and we are grateful for that. The social worker will continue to be in contact with us and my sister to see how the family situation is going, but that's it for now. I still haven't spoken to my sister, nor has she tried to contact me, and the same goes for my brother-in-law. I don't even know if they're talking to each other, because the last I heard he wasn't talking to her and was trying to keep their son away from her. But since he has supported her during this time, I hope things at home are better now. I have kept my father informed of everything, and now that we finally have a decision, we can breathe easy. This has been very stressful for everyone, not just for my sister or me. It is probably the first time something like this has happened in our family and we are not used to dealing with these situations. Until we had a decision, it was the only thing we could think about. But I'm glad we were able to resolve things without too much trouble. And above all, I'm glad my sister decided to seek help to get better. As for my son, he's practically back to normal. He's playing, laughing, jumping and doing everything children his age do. At school he still plays with my nephew, regardless of the situation between my sister and me. And that's how it should be. Whatever the relationship between us is now, we haven't let it affect the children. I hadn't talked about this before because there were other more important things to mention. But I think it's time to talk about it because there have been some questions about it. As my son and his cousin go to the same school, it's normal for them to spend a lot of time together and they are very close, so they have continued to be friends without problems. It doesn't bother me when my son comes home from school wanting to go to his cousin's house to play. I'm glad they are happily oblivious to everything that's going on with their parents. But of course, I couldn't take him. So I had to say no because I wasn't sure if my sister would want me there or not, but I'm glad they're still friends. At first I wasn't sure if my sister would like her son to keep playing with my son. But she didn't have a problem with it either. So I think we're at a point where we can let them be. And I think that even though they're very young, it's important to respect what they want to. So when things calm down a bit, I think I'm going to go to her house with my son and let the children play together because my son has told me many times that he wants everything to go back to the way it was before. He wants to go to his cousin's house and spend time with him, and he's not even afraid of his aunt anymore. It's easy for him to forget, not so much for us. But for his sake, I'm going to try to talk to my sister and see if she would agree to have play dates like before. If not at her house, her husband can always drop my nephew off at my house, like we used to. For now, I think we should leave things as they are. But in the future, I'm definitely going to try to do something about it because I don't want to disappoint my son. And I definitely don't want him to stop seeing his cousin. They're very close and I want them to maintain that friendship no matter what the family problems. Update 5. Hi, it's been a couple of months and my sister and I haven't completely returned to normal. But I talked to her about our children and we have started organizing their play dates again. Of course, she still can't be alone with my son, as the social worker suggested. And we make sure that this is the case. She is going to therapy and parenting classes, and she is trying to control her temper. She also told me that she didn't like it when she found out that I had reported her to CPS. Although she had apologized to me, she understood why I did it and doesn't believe things can go back to the way they were between us. But she's going to try for the children and I agree with her. I really don't think we can go back to the way things were. But for our children, we're definitely going to try. She and her husband are also going to couples therapy. My brother-in-law and I are talking again. So he told me that at first he was very angry with her. He didn't want to talk to her or let her near his son. But over time, he realized that ignoring her was only going to hurt the family. So he decided to face the situation. And since he doesn't want a divorce, they have decided to try to work things out. So far, they are doing well and I am happy for them. My father and my sister still don't speak to each other. He doesn't want to take the first step and she doesn't want to acknowledge that he exists. I don't know what will happen there, but as I said, I'm not going to worry about things that are not directly my problem. They are both adults. If they want to work it out, they will. For now, I'm grateful that things in the family are working out.